Coming up, I'm going to be talking about how Pixar is not going to be sending as much stuff to Disney Plus anymore, plus they're working on a number of sequels and much more. But before we go any further, make sure you do hit that subscribe button to keep up with the latest Disney Plus news. Hi, it's Roger here from What's On at DisneyPlus.com, a quick Disney Plus news roundup. Let's start off with talking about some Pixar content, because there's a lot of news that came out of an article from Bloomberg that I wanted to get into. So first off, Jim Morris, who is the president of Pixar, kind of revealed a few different things that I wanted to speak about, including the fact that they don't think they're going to be sending any more films straight to Disney Plus. Now, this is not really a huge surprise. Pixar have been kind of doing the exact opposite thing of they had that massive problem where they sent 3 films straight to Disney Plus. That was Luca, Turning Red, and Soul. And that has caused major problems for Disney as a whole, because audiences got used to not seeing films at cinemas and so didn't see the need to go out. Now, at the time, they did make a lot of sense, especially Soul made a lot of sense because everything was closed, they didn't have anything in, and they needed to get some content out, and it was a big Christmas release. So Soul, I think, made sense. Turning Red was a little bit of an odd one because it was at the tail end of the pandemic, and at the time when they were trying to make that decision, there was like the Omicron variant, and there was worries that it was going to pick up again. So I think Disney just went, no, we're not going to risk it. And with Luca, it was kind of coming into the first summer where we were able to go out, and I don't think they were fully sure what was going to be happening, and people weren't going back to the cinema for family films. So they kind of made those decisions. However, they weren't making the same decisions for Walt Disney Animation. They were putting things out in cinemas and on Disney Plus Premier Access, or with Encanto, where they put it out just for like 30 days first. They were treating the two studios very differently. And Pixar has just generally just been felt like a studio that just hasn't quite had the same, impact that it used to. Lightyear was not very well received at the box office. Elemental had the worst opening weekend for a Pixar film. It went on to kind of recover and got in just around about the 500 million mark, so was seen as a little bit of a success. There's a lot riding on Inside Out 2, which comes out next month. I'm looking forward to watching it. I think there's a lot of people are. This is not going to be a $1 billion movie. It looks like it's going to have one of the bigger box office openings of the year. But ultimately, box office numbers are drastically down, and we need to start kind of getting used to that with the impact of not having China involved and just people going less to the cinema. Yeah, we are seeing less people go to cinema. But Pixar is still wanting to put its films out there first and build up the element and also as well that Pixar films cost a lot more to make than films from other animation studios. A lot of this is down to a lot more technology being used, developing new things. I think also with the way that they do some accounting as well, a lot of the other issues at like Pixar get included in it where they don't in other movies. And ultimately, do we want a load of films to look like Garfield and the Minions, which is all very childish and they don't really make any big developments? It's all just let's churn them out as fast and as cheap as possible. Pixar likes to push the envelope, but that comes at a cost. Now they probably, I think, have to get somewhere in between. I think they maybe have to be like, look, we can't keep pushing, we need to have somewhere in between. They are going to be focusing a lot more now on trying to balance franchises and originals. They have talked about the fact that they still need to do that. There's lots of talk of them kind of continuing on and doing some sequels for maybe The Incredibles and the Finding Nemo franchises, which doesn't surprise me. I think Incredibles makes a lot of sense because it's the one that you can keep churning out, you can keep having new villains and stuff. It's a superhero series, so therefore it's more open. But we've got the other problem of superhero fatigue, of where I would probably, if I was there right now, I'd be going, let's just hold off on Incredibles right now. Let's just give Marvel a little bit of room. Let's just let superheroes just cool for a little bit and then maybe bring it back in a few years' time. And obviously with films, they have to plan like 4 or 5 years in advance. So that's one thing that they're going to be focusing on. They're still going to be doing original content. They're still going to be doing that, but they're going to be trying to balance between the two a little bit more. Maybe one original, franchise, etc. They are looking now, their schedule is to try and get out 3 movies in a 2-year period. Now in the past, it's been generally about 1 film every year. They have upped their production for Disney Plus, but that they kind of pushed it a little bit too far. But I think they're trying to get the balance right, and I think they're going for, as I said, 3 in every 2 years, which I don't think is too bad. I think that's perfectly doable. They also talked about how In general, like I said, they don't want to be sending any films straight to Disney Plus. That whole thing is long gone. But also they want to see how Win or Lose does, which is going to be the new first series, which is going to be coming out at some point on Disney Plus. They've kept pushing it back and pushing it back and pushing it back. And they announced this back at the Investors Day in 2020. Here we are, nearly 4+ years later, and we still haven't seen it. I think they've bumped it back to make sure Inside Out 2 is a big box office hit, and then they'll drop it at a later date. I think we're only going to get that one series. They said, they're going to wait and see how this one does. Well, if you wait and see how this thing does, so say they release it, I don't know, say like November, or whatever date they choose, then they're going to wait and see it. So therefore you're getting into another year. And then you see how long it's taken them to turn it from the announcement into that's another 5 years. They should have, if they were committed to making series, they needed to be doing like, one a year or two a year, but they never ramped up the production. They've laid off some staff recently, and I think they're just focusing now on movies. Now, they did say that they are actually also making a new series for Disney Plus featuring the Inside Out characters called Dream Productions. So if you remember from the original film, there's a whole scene where they end up going into Dream Productions and they're recreating dreams for Riley's sort of dreams and nightmares, and we see the unicorn, and there's also the big clown, and ultimately I think this is probably more likely going to be shorts rather than a full-length series. I think shorts, 6-7 minutes will probably work out quite nicely for them, and they can open that up. They can do silly things, they can do reenactments of movies, and I think that's where that works. I think Dream Productions, no word yet on when it's coming out. It might be a while off, but I think they also did say that they want to make sure there is a clear definition between theatrical releases and streaming, and I think the way they're going to do that, shorts. I think we're going to see the little shorts dropping occasionally onto Disney Plus and the big films in cinemas. And I also think with shorts as well is it kind of allows them to continue a franchise and to continue feeding that franchise. We saw it with like Frozen, which is obviously not a Pixar film, but if you keep dropping these little ones here and there, you can kind of give a little bit of a boost to it, some new merchandise, and just sort of drive a little bit of interest in that series and franchise as a whole, which works for theme parks and all those other bits and pieces. But yeah, we're definitely going to be seeing, I think, a lot more from Pixar in terms of films and less about everything else. The fact that, like I said, coming out with this whole thing about waiting and seeing how the audience reacts to it, it's like, really, that means we are years away, and I think they've realised that they just want to focus on movies. The other key thing as well that he mentioned during the interview was that they're also going to be trying to make films a little bit more from the mass market. The last few films that they've been making, they've been trying to lean in more on the directors and them telling their stories. So like Elemental was about an immigrant family. You had Turning Red was about the director's relationship with her mother. And the Luca director also spoke about how this was a reflection of his time growing up as a kid in Italy. They kind of want to pull back on those individual stories a little bit more and do a little bit more for the mass market, a little bit. And I think that's probably not a bad thing. I think you can look at the last few movies from Pixar and you can definitely feel like they went down the line of maybe thinking more with the creators rather than for what we want to watch and what more people are going to watch. And I think you have to get that balance right. I think a good story from a creator and their own past and bringing that into it is essential. But at the same time, that there's no point telling a story that no one's interested in, and maybe make it more for an audience. Because Soul is a movie that I definitely look at and go, that just didn't feel like a film for kids. It just wasn't very exciting, wasn't very interesting. Turning Red, I thought was a really good movie, and I really liked it. But again, kids, other than The Big Panda, I don't know quite how that one went down. I also want to talk a little bit about Onward, because that movie also kind of slipped by the issues, because that one got released literally the week before the pandemic. Everything got shut down, so that box office numbers was drastically hit. But for a lot of, and they rushed that to Disney Plus because, well, there was nothing open and stuff. So that kind of gets past the zone. But even Onward has been, so they had 6-7 movies, and in total they haven't made as much money as the last pre-pandemic major new release, which obviously was Toy Story, over $1 billion. But It's going to be interesting to see how they move forward with Inside Out 2, whether or not it's going to pull in that audiences, whether or not Elio is going to do the same. I think they're doing a lot of work on getting that maybe more, again, mainstream, getting it to appeal to a large audience, which I think Pixar needs to do. That means maybe pulling back a little bit more, like they've talked about, like with messaging, which has put families off. And they're going to try and, maybe make less big steps right now and just kind of just try and get back to where they were. It's not uncommon for studios, and especially with Disney, to drop off and then they come back. And, we've seen this over the time, there's always peaks and troughs. And it does feel like Pixar was in a bit of a trough. And it was starting to come out the other side where they've made the changes. They've done some big post-mortems on what was working, what wasn't. And yeah, so things are definitely moving forward with Pixar. But I'd love to know your thoughts on all of this in the comments below. In our question today, which comes from Brendan, he says, Roger, I wanted to ask you, with Inside Out 2 coming out very soon, do you know if there's going to be a short before the movie starts in theatres like they did with Elemental last year? Has there been any official confirmation of that at all? I'm guessing at this point maybe otherwise. As of yet, we have not heard anything about it. Usually in the past, we tend to see these kind of things teased in advance. Got the Annecy Film Festival coming up in France in a couple of weeks' time, which is all about animation. I've not seen anything announced about any premieres or anything like that. That would normally be the time when they would show this kind of stuff off. They might just pop a little spark short or something in front of it and do it that way. And I'm going to be honest, there's this kind of thing with this of, in some way, they want all the focus on Inside Out 2, and I don't know if maybe they've learned, like, they don't want to confuse things and just get it out. I personally always like having a short before an animation. I think that's a really cool little way of doing it. But I don't know. I mean, they might just not bother. I hope they do. I hope there's one in there, and then they can then obviously drop it onto Disney Plus shortly after that. I wouldn't write it off, but maybe they're just holding off and they've decided that they don't want to be doing marketing and stuff like that on it and spending money on that. All the focus right now is on Inside Out 2. That's my pure guess. That's what because I think last year, like I said, they were building up to it and hyping it up and getting it out there, and that's not always a good thing, I don't think. But let me know what you think of all this in the comments below. If you've got a good question, I'll pick it up for next week's videos. And also on that note, guys, thank you very much. See you guys soon. Laters.